Join me, Shakti Durga, and Dr. Pat every first and third Monday at 3 p.m. Pacific Time as we explore relationships, inner plane realities, channel light beings, learn from ancient wisdom, and share tools to navigate life with ease and grace. Are you ready to step into your highest potential? Subscribe to Mystery School. Your transformation starts here.
If you're looking to create more joy, energy, fun, and good health in your parents.
Welcome to Spark Faith with me, Dr. Chris Sargent. This show is about renewed health, rooted in truth, and restored by grace. What does finding health look like for you? Do you have a vision for your future self and a way to get there? I'm Dr. Chris, and after 33 years in functional medicine and a lifelong journey through brain health, weight loss, hormones, mindset, and faith, I know that real transformation doesn't come from willpower or white-knuckling your way to wellness. It comes from gratitude, honoring your body as the temple that God created. This show is about body stewardship, not shame. It's about rewiring your mindset, your metabolism, and your spirit to find lasting health without the grind. I'll help you cut through the noise, see opportunities instead of obstacles, and finally live the healthy, purposeful life you were created for. Let's spark faith and transformation together. Spark Faith starts now. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Spark Faith Show. I am Dr. Chris Sargent, and today we are going to talk about the glucose regulation ladder or the hormone regulation ladder in terms of blood glucose, blood sugar. So before you go, this is probably going to be some stuff that you haven't heard before. We hear a lot about cortisol and insulin, but we don't ever talk a lot about some other really integral hormones that might be taking away your ability to sleep. We are going to talk about sleeping through that 2 to 4 a.m. window, because I know that many of y'all are stressed and that is your favorite time to wake up. No, it isn't. It's terrible, isn't it? It's so annoying when you look at your clock and it is like 2:26 and you don't know whether you feel like you've been asleep forever or you feel like you just got to sleep, but all you know is that it's going to be difficult to get back to sleep. So I'm going to give you some ideas around why your blood sugar and the hormones related to it may be impacting that sleep time. And this is critical for everyone. This isn't just midlife, right? Like I know that my kids in their 20s sometimes have a hard time sleeping and sleeping through the night or getting really good deep sleep. And so blood glucose regulation is a thing. So we are going to talk about not only insulin and cortisol, but we are going to talk about glucagon, kind of a fun hormone to talk about. We are going to talk about norepinephrine, right? And we are going to talk about adrenaline. So those three also play out in keeping your blood sugar regulated all day and all night long, because this is not just something that happens during the day. This is something that we have to deal with all the time. So let's get into this. So this is not just about stress, right? If you're waking between 2 and 4 a.m., if you are crashing in the afternoon, if you're feeling anxious after a night of carbs or alcohol, because we're going to talk about a little bit about alcohol today too, you might just blame stress, but your body is running a glucose correction system, right? It is following a very specific order in order to keep your glucose regulated so that your brain, because that is the body's primary goal is to keep your brain alive, because as long as your brain is alive, the rest of your body can function. And so that is the goal here, is to keep glucose going to the brain in an appropriate amount to keep your body functioning at its best. And when we don't eat enough carbs, when we restrict too long, when we do sometimes fasting too long, there's a place for fasting. I have a whole show on that. But when we aren't doing it properly, or when we're doing it when our body is not regulated, which we have talked at length about over the last several episodes, about keeping our body regulated, nervous system regulation, stress regulation, all the parts, right? This is just another part of regulating so that our brain can work with our body in an optimal way, which is really what functional medicine is all about. So today we're going to break down insulin, glucagon, norepinephrine, adrenaline, cortisol, and then understanding this ladder changes how you can interpret your symptoms. So let's start with insulin, because insulin is your storage switch. Okay. So when you eat, glucose or blood sugar goes up. I think we all know that, right? And insulin is released from your pancreas, right? And glucose can now move into the cells. It's not quite that easy, but it's easy for us today, right? Any excess glucose is stored as glycogen. I know it's another big word, but that happens in the liver and in your muscle tissue, right? Like we can store glycogen, and then any other excess gets stored as fat, which we don't want. So then glucose, when we need it, that it comes out of our liver when we need it. But right now, because we've just eaten, insulin has been released, glucose is moved into the cells, excess is stored as glycogen. Glucose release from the liver is taken out of the picture right now, right? Because it's in storage mode, right? So insulin turns on storage, it turns on fat storage too, and turns off release of blood sugar or glucose. Now, if glucose rises really fast, right? Let's say we're eating our candy bar, our granola bar, our sugar-filled, carb-filled oatmeal in the morning, there may be a really sharp rise in your blood sugar. And then the insulin response is also going to be sharp. And so your glucose may drop very quickly afterwards. And that, in terms of symptoms, can show up as maybe within an hour or two after you eat, you feel sleepy. And it's because of this very sharp up and down that happens. And the drop will determine what happens next. Okay, so in the regulation ladder, when your glucose levels or blood sugar falls, the body escalates its order, right? When it falls, the first thing that's going to happen, if your body is calm, the first thing that's going to be released is glucagon. I know, you've never met this little hormone before, right? You've never met this guy before. But what that does is it signals the liver to release some glycogen, which can be then converted back to glucose, and your glucose can rise gently. This is if we are calm, right? This is quiet stabilization. There's no symptoms. This glucagon is released from the pancreas as well. So you know what your pancreas is doing here. It's making up a bunch of hormones that have to do with glucose regulation, among other things. And this signals, like I said, it signals the liver to break down glycogen and raises glucose kind of slowly. There's no anxiety around this, like you don't have any symptoms. This is just a quiet glucose stabilizer, right? And as long as your glycogen storage is strong, and then this is enough. And if this happens overnight, you're not going to wake up, right? So if you have a drop in glucose and your body is well stored with good, healthy glycogen, and you haven't been stressed, then glucagon can come along, raise that glucose ever so slightly, and you just keep sleeping through the night. Kind of cool, right? Well, if we have some stress already in our life, and if your glycogen stores aren't perfect, we get something called the norepinephrine release. This is like an alert tone, right? This is released from two places. Our adrenals are now going to get involved, right? So our adrenals do a couple different things, but one of them is releasing epinephrine and norepinephrine, or adrenaline and noradrenaline. They're all the same. Well, norepinephrine and noradrenaline, adrenaline and epinephrine, those are equal. All right, so these get released from the adrenal and the brainstem. This is going to cause your heart rate to rise slightly, right? We're going to get your sympathetic nervous system involved. This is your fight and flight system. And your blood pressure is going to nudge up, and you are going to wake up a little bit as your glucose is being raised through the efforts of noradrenaline or norepinephrine. Okay, you may feel restless. You may feel kind of warm. Your mind kind of comes on. You're not exactly in a panic, right? You're just like, oh, I'm awake, not really asleep, kind of in that space, right? And so the problem with norepinephrine is it doesn't really allow you to sleep well, and you're kind of awake. You're in this kind of awake, not awake space. But you're not going to sleep well, and you're not going to be rested in the morning. If we do not have a good sense inside our body, is not safe, if we are becoming dysregulated, or if our glucose drops too fast, too much, then we are going to need our adrenaline as an emergency signal, which is also produced in the adrenals. And this is going to be very short-lived. It increases our heart rate. It mobilizes glucose very, very quickly. And we get a fight or flight surge. Our heart begins to pound. We sweat. We're on high alert. And we are awake. Yay. Right? Kind of one of those kind of awakened times, right? Like you just wake up suddenly. That may be because your glucose dropped so drastically that your body was like, whoa, 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 we need to sound the emergency alarm and get some adrenaline pumping in order to get the glucose back online. Cortisol gets in the mix now, okay? Cortisol is about sustained correction, and it is also produced in the adrenals, like we've talked about before. This is a little bit slower onset than your noradrenaline or your adrenaline. And it acts a lot longer. This helps to maintain our blood glucose, and it stimulates something called gluconeogenesis. Wow, that's a big word, but let's break it down, right? Glucose, neo meaning new, genesis meaning create, right? So we're going to create some new glucose. And glucose raises over time. And this cortisol in and of itself is anti-inflammatory, but this cortisol will follow our circadian rhythm, and it's supposed to go down at night and then raise up to a higher level as we wake up. It's not supposed to wake you up in the middle of the night because you need glucose, right? It's supposed to keep you awake in the morning, maintaining glucose overnight. So this is going to support survival during fasting. So honestly, cortisol is not the enemy, it is the manager. So, but here's the kicker, right? Cortisol is there to protect your brain. And that happens even it has to borrow from your muscle. So cortisol is there to protect your brain, even if it has to borrow from your muscle tissue. This is not what we want, right? And the occasional correction in this way is fine. But when we are chronically under stress, we're not sleeping, and our cortisol levels are all over the place, like I've talked about before, our blood sugar cannot stay in a good place. And we are going to take the amino acids, which build up our muscle tissue, and use those for fuel and turn those amino acids into glucose, which is a huge process and makes you tired anyway. And you are going to lose muscle faster, right? And this also causes, like, you don't have enough glycogen storage. Maybe you've done some fasting, maybe you're not eating enough carbohydrates versus the energy that you're expending. It will ultimately slow your metabolism. Like I always say, your muscle mass equals your metabolism. And you're going to have more and more reliance on that cortisol. So why does this hit harder after we are kind of in that midlife shift? And we've talked a little bit about this, partially because we have lower estrogen, right? Lower progesterone. We don't have as much muscle mass because we've lost it. And if you're not exercising to keep it up, you're going to lose it faster. We do not recover very well from all of the sympathetic, our fight and flight responses. We're not recovering very well from that because we've endured more and more and more over time. Some of y'all don't eat enough protein to keep the muscle mass on that you need. I mean, that may be a problem. And for some of us, for me particularly, intermittent fasting is just a bad idea. And it may or may not be a bad idea for you, but it can really cause, for some of you, a lot more stress in your body and really wreak havoc in your blood sugar. Muscle is protective, right? Because muscle stores that glycogen that we talked about. It buffers those glucose swings, and it reduces the need for cortisol to escalate, like particularly in the middle of the night. Less muscle actually is a faster climb up that ladder. We're going to get that adrenaline release. We're going to noradrenaline release. We're going to get that adrenaline release. The glucagon is not going to be enough. That calm set, like slow rise glucose is not going to be enough. And so we're going to get more nighttime waking, and we're going to have more daytime crashes. So y'all, you're not fragile, right? It's just that your buffer has changed. You just don't have that buffer that you used to have. And this is what happens to our bodies over time, right? This is an accumulation of stress, whether it's 6 months, a year, 2 years, or maybe a lifetime for some of you, depending on your trauma, big T and little t, right? So what about eating refined carbs at night? I know I used to be a nighttime popcorn chipaholic kind of girl. That was definitely part of my food addiction a long time ago. But what ends up happening is that rapid glucose rise causes your insulin to surge, right? You're going to get a rapid drop, and that ladder of glucagon release isn't going to be fast enough. So either norepinephrine or noradrenaline, and then adrenaline is going to kick in. And then what's going to happen? You're not really going to be able to sleep as well. And if you eat those carbs by itself, you're going to get a stronger insulin response, a faster drop, and a greater escalation in that ladder, right? A super rapid drop is definitely going to be that adrenaline. It's going to pop in. Moderate drop, norepinephrine. Easy. Persistent instability leads to persistently high levels of cortisol. So rapid spikes are going to create rapid corrections. And that correction can wake you up 2 to 4 hours later. So you have that snack at 9, you go to bed at 10, by 2, you are wide awake. So hopefully this helps to start to sort out why this happens, right? So let's talk about alcohol and our glass of wine that helps us chill out. And yes, initially, actually, it can help you go to sleep, right? It causes an increase in GABA, G-A-B-A, which is a nice calmative neurotransmitter. However, okay, here we are. We're going to use this big word again. It suppresses or it decreases gluconeogenesis. So it suppresses those signals that turn on, hey, we need some glucose. Okay. Instead, your liver is busy detoxing the alcohol and not so concerned with your glucose levels. Okay. Your liver is preoccupied, right? Like we are when we're scrolling, we're preoccupied. Your liver is preoccupied with detoxing the alcohol instead of keeping your blood sugar even. And this is going to change the way that liver glucose, this is going to change the way that your glucose is released from your liver. Okay. And so glucose drifts down, glucagon pops in and tries to correct it in a nice calm way. But if it falls too low and your glycogen is low, then norepinephrine kicks in. And glutamate, the opposite of GABA, kicks in. And now you are awake. So you've had your glass of wine, but now you're awake between 2 and 4. And you are wide awake, and it's going to be really hard to fall asleep. You may even feel some anxiety. That's part of the hangover feel, right? Some anxiety. Your sleep is going to be very light and fragmented, and you're going to be awake. And this doesn't necessarily have anything to do with stress levels, like mental health stress levels, but it's because your liver was just preoccupied doing other things, trying to get rid of all of those things. In terms of symptoms during the day, we're going to take a little shift here because we've talked about how it can feel at night, but during the day, sometimes between mid-morning and sometimes in the middle of the afternoon, that 3 p.m. time, that can also be a time of anxiety, brain fog. Maybe you get a little bit irritable. Maybe you work out in the morning and you're feeling kind of shaky. You're having a lot of carb cravings, right? Sometimes these are emotional, so we definitely need to tap into that. And sometimes these are metabolic, and that's where this whole ladder of things can tip the scales into anxiety, and we're feeling all this anxiety and we think it's something mental health wise, and it may be, but then on top of it, you've got a blood sugar drop, right? You've got this dysregulated blood sugar. So it can be more than one thing, right? I often say like ticks and fleas cause a dog to scratch. And so just like, hey, because you may be psychologically stressed, but if your glucose is off, that may also cause anxiety. So sometimes what we feel psychologically may be physiological correction, right? So what sometimes feels very psychological, that anxiety, may just be your physiology trying to correct itself by the added adrenaline or norepinephrine. And that shifts into something that you can actually take control of, right? Because you can control what you eat and when you eat it. And so in terms of getting some regulation into this, right? We want to figure out, okay, great, Dr. Chris, you've told us all of this physiology, which you probably will have to go back and listen to again. But just suffice it to say that when our blood sugar is dysregulated, we may have some hormone impacts of adrenaline and noradrenaline, norepinephrine that cause our hearts to flutter and increase our anxiety levels. And so let's figure out sort of at a high level, what can we do to mitigate some of those things, right? This isn't about fear or restriction. Like, let's just stabilize some blood sugar here, right? So the first thing, and I've said this before, is a protein forward breakfast. Doesn't matter if it comes in the form of a protein water, a protein shake, as long as this is protein forward and doesn't have so much fruit in it that you're negating the protein that you're taking in. All right. We want to avoid carb only snacks, right? So pair those carbs with some protein and a little bit of fat. Don't undereat your dinner, but make sure you have some good protein, fat, and a little tiny bit of carb, right? Tiny bit, quarter of a cup, third of a cup of some kind of starchy carb at dinner. Don't undereat because you think you're trying to lose weight. That's not going to help us at this point. Some good strength training, right? Increased muscle mass increases your ability to store glycogen and deal with blood sugar bloops. Avoid alcohol close to bedtime. I know you don't want to hear that, but this stability needs to be bigger than the intensity, right? The goal isn't about less food necessarily, right? It's about less escalation of this adrenaline and all of those pieces. So, when your blood sugar is stable, your nervous system stays lower on the ladder, and that is what we want, right? And that's what regulation really, really means. And before we wrap up, I just want to say something. What we talked about today, insulin, glucagon, norepinephrine, cortisol, this is about regulation. This is the body trying to protect you, and y'all don't always need more willpower. You may need stability. You may need some more understanding, like we talked about today. You may need more rhythm. So that's really what my Living Fresh Collective is going to be about. This is not a crash program. It's not treatment, and it's definitely not perfection, right? We are going to walk through foundations, regulation, energy, strength, and health together so that you can learn how your body works. The more you know how your body works, the more you can take care of it, and the less you need me. Right? These middle of the night wake ups and afternoon crashes, wired and tired living are not solved by information, right? They're solved by being able to integrate what we talked about with some support. So if you're tired of cycling and ready for some sustainable rhythms, the collective is where that formation is going to happen. I'm going to share some details soon. I know I've been talking about it for a few weeks, but for now, just remember that stability lowers that ladder, and stability can be built. I love you guys. I'm Dr. Chris Sargent. We are renewing your health, rooted in truth and restored by grace. Love y'all. Bye. You've been listening to Spark Faith with me, Dr. Chris Sargent. This show is about renewed health, rooted in truth, and restored by grace. Tune in every Thursday morning at 9:30 a.m. Pacific on the Transformation Talk Radio for more simple, faith-fueled steps to live the vision God placed in your heart. Are you ready to take the next step? Schedule a discovery call or connect with me at drchrissargent.com. That's DRKRIS Sargent.com. While you're there, download my free ebook, Endless Energy, the 6 non-negotiable keys to endless energy, and sign up for an upcoming masterclass. Don't forget to subscribe, like, share the show, and I'd love to connect with you on social media at Dr. Chris Sargent. Let's keep sparking faith and transformation together. Can't wait to see y'all next time.